The stars were quiet in the far edges of the galaxy, yet the silence was broken by a strange signal that pulsed across the dark void. The signal was simple, a single warning repeated again and again in every known language. Do not enter Terran territory. The Galactic Empire's scouts picked up the transmission, and laughter filled the command deck of their cruiser. To them, the words were nothing more than empty threats from a weak and forgotten people. The captain of the scout ship leaned back in his chair, a confident smirk on his alien face. Humans, he said with a mocking tone. The ancient race that disappeared from history, they think they can order us. His crew joined in the laughter, their voices echoing against the cold steel walls of the ship. They dismissed the message, but the warning repeated, each time sharper, almost alive, as if the words themselves carried weight beyond sound. Still, the Empire's commanders were not impressed. The scout captain ordered his ship across the invisible border, sensors humming as they cut through the black emptiness. No Terran ships appeared, no defenses lit the void. The crew relaxed, convinced that the humans were a myth, that the warning was nothing but a desperate attempt to scare stronger races away. Then silence took them. The sensors that had been alive with data went dark. One by one, the systems flickered. The crew shouted in panic, trying to restart their instruments. Then, without warning, the ship shook. Lights flickered and the sound of tearing metal ripped through the halls. Outside the viewports, the stars themselves seemed to vanish. Something was there, but it was unseen yet moving. The captain ordered his men to power the weapons, to fire blindly into the dark, but the controls were dead. He shouted for communications, but the comms were silent. He turned, eyes wide, as if he felt something watching from the void. Then came the last thing they heard before the ship was ripped apart. A voice, human, calm and cold, whispering through the static. You were warned. Hours later, back at the Imperial capital, reports of the missing scout ship reached the High Council. The Emperor listened in silence as his generals debated. Some claimed it was a technical failure. Others said pirates had destroyed the vessel. But none dared to say the truth. None wanted to admit that the old stories of humans might be real. In the shadows of the council chamber, one old admiral spoke, his voice raspy with age. I have seen them before, the Terrans, he said. The chamber fell silent, all eyes turned toward him. They do not bluff. They do not warn unless they are ready to strike. If they said do not enter, then we must listen. The room erupted with laughter. Again, younger officers mocking him, calling him a coward. The Emperor's lips curved into a thin smile. Terrans are myths, Admiral. Shadows from a forgotten war. The Emperor's golden eyes gleamed with arrogance. And myths do not frighten the Galactic Empire. But far away, in the dark edges of Terran space, another ship drifted. Black, as the void, its hull scarred from ancient battles, its weapons powered down but ready. Inside, human eyes watched the Imperial fleet gathering. Silent and calculating, they had heard the laughter, they had seen the arrogance, and they were ready. The humans had not been part of galactic politics for centuries. Many thought they had died out. Others thought they had hidden on some lost world. But the truth was worse. The humans had been watching, waiting, learning. They did not seek conquest. They did not seek glory. They only wanted one thing: to be left alone. The signal continued, spreading farther into space, stronger each cycle. A cold voice carved into the void. Do not enter Terran territory. Empires, merchants, and wanderers all heard it. Some laughed, some grew afraid, some ignored it, but all remembered it. Back in the Emperor's court, a decision was made. The Empire would not be mocked. The Emperor raised his hand and declared, Send the fleet. If the Terrans exist, we will crush them. If they do not, then we will erase this insult forever. Cheers filled the chamber. The pride of the Empire swelled. Ships were prepared. Crews gathered. Banners unfurled. The march to Terran territory had begun, but somewhere deep in Terran command, humans watched through hidden sensors. They tracked every movement, every Imperial ship. The human commander stood over a dark holographic table, his voice steady. They are coming. Around him, men and women nodded. None spoke of fear, only duty, only preparation. One officer leaned forward, his voice low. What if they don't listen to the warning? The commander's eyes narrowed, cold steel in his gaze. Then they will learn why the galaxy feared us. The void remained quiet, stars twinkling as if unaware of the storm about to break. Yet in that silence, a promise was already written, a promise that blood would fall, that warships would burn, that the galaxy would once again remember the name of humanity. For the Empire thought the warning was weakness, but it was only the first step, the first reminder. And when the fleet crossed the border, the humans would be waiting, their ships cloaked in darkness, their weapons sharpened, their silence louder than any roar. They would remind the galaxy that Terran territory was sacred ground, and no empire would ever walk it without a cost. The Imperial fleet moved through the void with quiet pride, their hulls gleaming under the distant suns. Each warship carried the banners of the Galactic Empire, a force that had crushed dozens of worlds. The commanders spoke with arrogance, their voices filled with victory before the battle even began. To them, the Terran warning was nothing but a ghost story. But as they advanced deeper into forbidden space, something began to feel wrong. The stars around them grew strangely dim. The crew whispered that the navigation systems were not matching the star charts. Whole constellations seemed to vanish from the screens. One officer shouted that their sensors were malfunctioning, yet every diagnostic returned perfect. It was as if the stars themselves refused to shine in Terran territory. Then they found the first wreck. It drifted silently through the void, the shattered remains of an alien cruiser, its hull split in half with brutal precision. No fire damage, no plasma scars, no signs of chaos. It had been taken apart as if by a surgeon's hand. The Imperial officers leaned closer to their screens, eyes wide. This was not the wreck of a careless battle. This was execution. More wrecks appeared as they pushed farther. Warships from different species, some from empires long vanished, their hulls frozen and torn. One ship had its bridge neatly removed. Another looked as if it had been folded in on itself, twisted beyond recognition. The crews of the Imperial fleet began to whisper, their hands shaking as they adjusted the controls. This cannot be real, a young officer muttered. No fleet, not even ours, could do this. His words were met with silence. The commanders forced themselves to laugh, though their voices cracked. Scavengers, pirates, nothing more, they said. Yet in their hearts, unease grew heavier. The fleet pressed onward, though every mile into Terran territory felt colder. The usual hum of energy around their engines now sounded distant, the comms filled with static for seconds at a time. Once, a transmission cut through their systems without permission, a deep voice repeating the words, "Do not enter Terran territory." The sound was not broadcast, it was whispered into every ear at once. Panic spread like fire through the lower decks. Crew members begged their captains to turn back. Some refused to even look out of the viewports, for outside the stars seemed wrong. They shifted faintly, bending as if something massive but unseen moved in the dark. The fleet's admirals ordered silence, reminding all that the Empire had crushed countless rebellions, that no human fleet could match them. Yet when their scout ships tried to scan the wrecks, none returned. The last transmission from one showed a shadow moving across its hull before the screen went black. The shadow was not a shape, but an absence of light itself. One admiral stood on his command bridge, staring into the endless black, his chest heavy with unease. He had fought in wars across half the galaxy, and he had seen terror before, but never like this. He turned to his second in command, whispering words he dared not let the others hear. This is not scavengers. This is not pirates. This is something waiting for us. As the fleet drifted deeper, the silence became unbearable. The sound of the engines no longer comforted the crews. Instead, it felt like a heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. Even the strongest captains began to snap at their crews, their tempers short, their pride cracking. Hours passed, and then the alarms rang. A ship ahead had detected movement, faint, faster than any Imperial vessel. Long streaks of energy flashed for only seconds before vanishing again. The admirals ordered their ships into formation, weapons primed, shields raised, yet nothing appeared. The radar screens showed empty space. And then they saw it. Through the viewport of the flagship, a silhouette drifted into sight, dark, silent, its design alien to Imperial eyes, smaller than their dreadnoughts, older in appearance, its hull scarred but strong. No engines burned behind it, yet it moved with impossible grace. A single Terran warship had appeared. The Imperial commanders laughed, mocking the small ship. "This is what we feared. A relic, an old craft," one admiral declared. But his laughter faded when the Terran ship turned, its side lined with massive rail cannons that glowed faintly, not with plasma, not with fusion, but with something they did not understand. The Terran ship did not fire, it did not speak. Instead, a signal burst through every Imperial channel, a voice calm, cold, and final. "You have crossed the line. Turn back or be erased." The commanders scoffed, pride stronger than reason. They ordered their fleet to advance. "One ship cannot stand against the Empire," they shouted. The order echoed across hundreds of bridges, but the crews obeyed with trembling hands. The Terran warship held its position, unmoving, silent, yet its presence filled the void like a predator waiting for prey to make the wrong step. The Imperial fleet edged closer, each second stretching like hours. And then, the Terran ship vanished. Not destroyed, not retreated. It simply blinked out of existence. The sensors went dark. The officers shouted in panic, trying to locate it. Alarms screamed across the fleet. Then, behind them, rail cannons opened fire. The rear of the Imperial fleet exploded into fire and debris. Ships cut apart with a precision that silenced every mocking word. In seconds, dozens of Imperial vessels were nothing but drifting wreckage. The survivors screamed across comms for orders, for mercy, for answers. But in the heart of every Imperial soldier, one truth became clear. The warning had not been a threat. It had been a mercy, and they had ignored it. The survivors of the first ambush limped forward, their ships scarred and broken. The Imperial fleet had lost a third of its strength in seconds, and the silence that followed was worse than the battle itself. No one laughed now. No one mocked the warnings. The admirals stood pale and shaken, their proud voices reduced to whispers. The Emperor's orders still echoed in their minds to crush the Terrans, to prove that no race could challenge the Empire. But every officer who stared out of the viewports knew the truth. They were not facing a primitive people. They were facing something older, something sharper, something waiting for centuries to strike. Hours passed as the fleet regrouped, the crews repairing what little they could. The dead floated in the void, their bodies frozen in silence, a reminder of the price of arrogance. Still, the admirals refused to retreat, their pride stronger than their fear. One of them sent a broadcast into the dark, his voice trembling but still defiant. "Terrans, we are the Empire. Surrender your territory and you will be spared." The reply came almost instantly, a calm human voice slipping through every comm channel at once. "Leave now," the voice said, not shouting, not begging, simply stating, "This is your last chance." Then silence followed. The commanders grew red with anger. One slammed, his fist on the console. "They dare threaten us with only one ship," he barked. The crews listened, but none shared his fury. Many whispered prayers. Others avoided the windows, afraid to see what lurked beyond the stars. The Empire decided to press deeper. Pushing toward the heart of Terran space, they expected resistance, fleets, defenses, planets ready for invasion. But the void remained empty, empty yet watching, as if unseen eyes tracked their every move. Then, without warning, 3 Terran ships appeared at once. Small frigates by Imperial standards, their hulls dull and scarred, yet their movements precise. They circled the Imperial fleet like predators. No weapons fired, no signals sent, they simply moved, showing that they could strike whenever they wished. The admirals ordered weapons locked, cannons glowed, plasma batteries charged. But the Terran ships blinked out of sight, disappearing without trace. The sensors screamed with errors. Some swore they saw shadows moving across the hulls of their own ships. Others shouted that they felt watched. One captain screamed into the comms, "They are inside the ship, I can feel them." Then his signal cut to static. At last, a Terran cruiser appeared, larger than the others, its hull etched with strange marks, human symbols that no one in the Empire understood. The ship did not fire. It simply transmitted an image into every Imperial screen. The face of a human commander appeared, his eyes sharp, his expression calm. He did not look like a savage. He looked like a soldier who had fought too many wars. "You should not be here," the human said, his voice steady, carrying no fear. "Turn back. This is your last chance. If you cross further, we will end you." An admiral spat in rage, shouting back through the comm, "You cannot defeat the Empire. You are a broken race hiding in shadows." His words echoed, but no human reply came. The Terran commander simply stared, his silence heavier than any threat. Then the transmission ended. The admirals roared for battle. The order was given. Dozens of Imperial ships launched their weapons at the lone Terran cruiser. Plasma and lasers tore through the void. The explosions lit the darkness with blinding fire. Cheers broke out among the Empire's officers. "We have destroyed them," one cried. But when the fire cleared, the Terran cruiser was gone, no wreckage, no debris, as if it had never been there. Before the cheers could fade, alarms rang out again. Terran warships uncloaked across the fleet, not one, not three, but dozens. Small ships, heavy ships, carriers, all surrounding the Imperials. The Empire's fleet was trapped. The Terrans did not fire at once. They moved with cold patience. Every formation precise. Every ship positioned like a knife at the throat. The Imperial crews panicked, some begging their captains to surrender, others gripping their weapons in shaking hands. The admirals screamed for them to hold formation, but fear had already broken discipline. At last, the Terran voice returned, not a whisper, but a roar that shook every channel. "You were warned." Then the battle began. Rail cannons tore through Imperial dreadnoughts, carving them apart like paper. Fighters swarmed out of Terran. Carriers, moving faster than the eye could follow. They cut through Imperial defenses with merciless skill. Every shot was precise, every strike brutal. The Empire's mighty fleet crumbled, ship after ship burning, exploding, vanishing into wreckage. The admirals screamed for retreat, but it was too late. Their escape routes were blocked, their weapons useless against the Terran cloak. Their pride turned to terror. In one corner of the fleet, a battleship tried to flee, its engines roaring at full speed, but a single Terran frigate followed, its rail cannon firing once. The battleship split in half, drifting silently into the void. In the chaos, the human commander's face appeared again, this time across every surviving screen. "We did not want this," he said, his voice calm even as the Empire burned. "But you chose to ignore the warning, and now you pay." The Imperials begged, pleaded for mercy, but the humans did not answer. They simply destroyed ship after ship, until only a handful of survivors remained. Broken, terrified, their fleets reduced to wreckage floating in the black sea of stars. And as the Terran warships vanished back into silence, the survivors understood the truth. The humans had not been bluffing, the warning had been real, and the Empire had just learned why no one dared enter Terran territory. The survivors of the ambush drifted back into formation, their fleet broken, their pride shattered. The void around them was filled with wreckage, fragments of ships that had once been the Empire's pride, burned and torn apart. The dead floated endlessly, silent witnesses to arrogance. Still, the admirals clung to their orders, to their belief that the Empire could not be defeated. On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Cartho stood with trembling hands hidden behind his back. He would not let his crew see fear, though his eyes betrayed it. "They are not gods," he said firmly, though his voice cracked. "They bleed like anyone else. We must strike harder, with discipline, with unity." His words sounded strong, but his officers shifted uneasily. None of them truly believed. Then the alarm sounded again, sharp and piercing. Radar screens filled. With signals, dozens of new contacts, the humans were back. Terran ships appeared in precise formation, decloaking around the fleet like predators surrounding wounded prey. They did not rush in, they did not taunt, they simply waited, their weapons glowing faintly in the dark. The Imperials braced for attack, but instead the Terrans did something unexpected. They broadcasted a single message, not words, but an image. It showed a planet scarred and burning, once green, now a wasteland. Human children starving under alien whips. chains across their necks, battles fought against impossible odds. The vision cut into every Imperial mind, a memory of what had been done to the Terrans long ago. "This is why," came the voice of the human commander, steady and cold. "We do not forgive, we do not forget. Every empire that thought us weak is now dust. Turn back or join them." For a moment the bridge fell silent. No one dared breathe. The image faded, but the memory remained. Some officers trembled openly. Whispers spread through the lower decks, men and women asking if perhaps the humans were right. Perhaps they were not enemies, but executioners of justice. Admiral Karthos silenced them with rage. "They play tricks," he roared. "Old images, ancient lies. We are the Empire. No one frightens us." His words rallied a few, but most remained pale, staring out at the silent Terran fleet. Finally, the order came. The Empire would attack again. Plasma batteries lit up. Energy torpedoes launched into the void. Waves of destruction hurled at the Terran formation. Explosions burst across the dark, filling the space with blinding light. For a heartbeat, hope returned. Perhaps the humans could be broken. Then the light cleared. The Terran ships remained untouched, their formations perfect as if nothing had happened. The sensors screamed in confusion. The weapons had hit, but the humans had bent the energy aside. Shields that should not exist glowed faintly before fading again. Technology far beyond anything the Empire knew. And then the Terrans moved. They came like wolves, fast and precise. Rail cannons fired, beams of solid metal traveling at impossible speeds. Imperial cruisers shattered with every hit. Dreadnoughts ripped apart in clean lines, as though the humans had mapped every weakness in advance. Fighters swarmed, tiny ships darting into blind spots, piercing engines and bridges with flawless strikes. The Empire's fleet tried to regroup, but the Terrans gave them no chance. They hit from all sides, disappearing into cloak and reappearing behind their prey. Every Imperial formation collapsed, their admirals shouting in chaos, comms filled with screams and static. Ships begged for orders, for rescue, but only silence answered. One Imperial battleship, massive and proud, turned its cannons toward the Terran flagship, charging its doomsday weapon, a beam that could crack moons. The weapon fired. The void blazed with white light. For a moment it seemed the humans would finally fall. But the Terran flagship shifted, not dodging, not blocking, it simply bent, its hull shimmering as the beam curved away, sliding harmlessly into the void. The Imperial crews gasped, disbelief turning to horror. The Terran flagship responded with one shot, a rail cannon strike that pierced the battleship's core. The massive vessel erupted in a silent fireball, fragments spinning into the endless black. Every Imperial soldier watching knew the truth then. The humans were not improvising. They were not scrambling. They were executing. Every move, every strike was part of a plan written long before the Empire crossed the border. Admiral Karthos stared at the wreckage, sweat dripping down his temples. "Impossible," he whispered. "They cannot know us this well." But deep inside he knew the truth. The Terrans had been studying the galaxy for centuries, watching, waiting, preparing for this very moment. Across the fleet, discipline broke. Imperial crews abandoned their stations, some even turning weapons on their own officers, refusing to fight a war they knew was lost. Whispers spread like fire. "The Terrans cannot be beaten. We must flee. We must beg for mercy." But there was no mercy. The humans fought with a silence that was more terrifying than screams. No celebration, no anger, only cold precision. They destroyed ships and then vanished into the void again, leaving survivors trembling. At last, only half the Imperial fleet remained, broken and scattered. Terran ships pulled back into darkness, not chasing, not finishing the slaughter. Instead, a single message echoed across the comms. "You were warned. This is the price of arrogance. Leave now, or the next battle will be your last." The Imperials hung in silence, torn between pride and survival. The admirals argued, their voices cracking. One demanded retreat, another demanded vengeance. The crews below whispered mutiny, none willing to push deeper into Terran space. and in the shadows the Terrans waited, unseen but present, their silence louder than any roar. The Empire had not yet retreated, but for the first time in its history, it hesitated, trembling before a race it had once called primitive, trembling before the humans who had risen from chains and turned into predators, and in that hesitation, the galaxy itself shifted. For everyone who heard the whispers of the battle now knew. The Terrans were real, and they were deadly. The wreckage of the last battle still floated behind the Imperial fleet, burning metal drifting like ghosts in the void. The survivors carried scars not only on their ships but in their minds. No soldier of the Empire had ever seen such precision, such silence, such cold fury in war. Pride was turning to dread, yet the admirals still clung to their oaths. Inside the flagship's war chamber, the commanders gathered, their holograms flickering across the table, voices rising in bitter argument. One demanded retreat, another screamed for vengeance. Admiral Cartho stood silent at first, staring at the map of Terran space glowing red before him. Finally he spoke, his words heavy. "We are not facing savages. We are facing something that has trained for centuries. They knew us before we knew them." His words unsettled the chamber. Younger admirals scoffed. "They are only human, a dying race," one argued. "Their ships are old, their numbers small." But Carthos shook his head. "Their weapons are not old. Their strategies are not random. Every strike was chosen, every weakness exploited. They fight as if they have done this before, as if they have studied us for generations," and he was right. For deep within hidden Terran command stations, the humans were not celebrating. They were watching, recording every Imperial tactic, analyzing every order. Their officers spoke in calm voices, their faces grim. "The Empire will return with more," one said. "They always do." The Terran commander nodded, his eyes cold. "And we will be ready, like we always were." Across the galaxy, whispers spread. Traders carried tales of an empire humiliated. Soldiers spoke of ships vanishing, of warnings ignored, of fleets crushed in silence, in smoke-filled cantinas and across shadowed starports. The name Terran was spoken again, a name that had almost been forgotten, a name that now brought fear. Back within the fleet, the Imperial crews could not silence the rumors. The lower decks were filled with hushed voices. Some said the Terrans had made alliances with demons. Others said their weapons were built from forbidden science. But the most common whisper was the one that shook the Empire most. "The Terrans are not new to this. They have fought wars before, worse than this." That whisper carried truth. Long ago, humanity had been enslaved by greater empires, their worlds taken, their children shackled. They had been forced into wars not their own, used as soldiers, as tools, as expendable lives. But the humans had learned. They had studied every weapon, every tactic, every weakness of their masters. They had endured, and when the moment came, they had risen, breaking their chains with blood and fire. The galaxy thought they had vanished, destroyed in their struggle. But the truth was different. The humans had gone silent, building in the dark, forging weapons not for conquest, but for survival, for one single rule: never again. Now, the Empire was learning that truth. A captured Imperial pilot floated in a cell aboard a Terran cruiser, his eyes wide as he watched the humans move with discipline, not with rage, not with cruelty, but with purpose. One officer passed by his cell, a scar across his jaw, his armor marked with battles. The pilot whispered through the bars, "Why fight us? Why not join the galaxy? You could have been allies." The human officer stopped, his gaze sharp, his voice calm. "Because the galaxy never wanted allies. It wanted slaves." Then he walked on, leaving the pilot trembling. Back in the Imperial fleet, more reinforcements arrived. The Emperor had sent dreadnoughts, massive carriers, weapons that could destroy entire moons. The admirals cheered, pride swelling once more. "Now we will break them," they declared. But even as they spoke, fear lingered in the eyes of their crews. As the massive fleet prepared for its next advance, the Terrans struck first, small groups of cloaked ships disabling supply lines, cutting fuel depots, even sabotaging communication relays. The Empire found itself blind. Its strength slowed, every step forward answered by shadows. Admiral Karthos watched with dread as reports poured in. "They know our moves before we make them," he whispered. "They strike not at our strength, but at our breath, our blood, our heart." He realized then what the others refused to see. The Terrans were not fighting for glory. They were fighting to cripple the Empire from within. Another message arrived, broadcast across every Imperial ship. The human commander's face appeared once more, eyes unblinking, voice steady. "We were slaves once. We fought with chains around our necks. We learned to fight without mercy. You think yourselves conquerors, but we have buried greater empires than yours leave or join them in dust." The message ended. Silence followed. And for the first time in Imperial history, whole crews prayed to gods they had long abandoned. Not for victory, but for survival. Still, the Emperor's command was absolute. Retreat was forbidden. The fleet pushed deeper, their weapons ready, their banners high. Yet every soldier knew in his heart that they were walking into a storm. On the edge of Terran space, massive warships stirred, titanic vessels older than the Empire itself, their hulls hidden in shadows, their cannons sleeping but ready. Within them, humans prepared, silent, efficient, no speeches, no songs, only duty. They had been forged in fire, in chains, in blood, and they had promised themselves one thing: never again. The Empire thought it faced a small rebellion, a handful of survivors, but what it truly faced was an old predator, scarred but alive and waiting, and as the stars grew dim around them, the Imperial fleet would soon learn that the humans had been preparing for this day their entire history. The Emperor's wrath thundered across the Empire when news of the second defeat reached his throne. Reports told of shattered fleets, of ships torn apart in seconds, of human warships vanishing and reappearing like shadows. The Emperor refused to believe it. His voice shook the marble halls as he declared, "No primitive race can defeat the Empire. No ghost from the past will humble us." He ordered the largest armada ever assembled. Hundreds of dreadnoughts, supercarriers, siege cruisers, and weapons so powerful they could burn continents. The armada stretched across the void like a steel ocean. A fleet so massive it darkened entire star systems as it moved. Officers boasted, soldiers cheered, and once again pride blinded them. But deep in their hearts, unease gnawed like a cold worm. Admiral Karthos, still scarred from the last battles, stood on the bridge of his new flagship, a colossal dreadnought known as the Emperor's Spear. His hands trembled as he studied the battle maps. The weight of silence pressed heavy on his shoulders. He alone remembered the eyes of the human commander, calm, merciless, unshaken. The fleet marched forward, entering Terran space with banners high, their engines roaring, their cannons hot across the stars. Whispers spread. Entire civilizations watched from the shadows, holding their breath. The Empire had mocked the warning. The Empire had been bloodied. But now the galaxy wondered, could even the Terrans stand against such a storm? For 3 days the Armada advanced without resistance. No Terran ships appeared, no signals were sent. The officers grew bolder, mocking their enemy. "They hide," they said. "They fear," so yet the silence only grew heavier, as though the void itself was waiting. On the 4th day it began. Sensors blinked with strange readings, faint shadows moving faster than light. Weapons locked on targets that vanished instantly. Radar flickered with hundreds of false signals. The admirals cursed, their voices echoing across comms. Then, with a single flash, the Terrans revealed themselves. An entire battle group emerged from the void, massive carriers, titanic warships, and ships of design the Empire had never seen before. Their hulls dark as stone, their weapons glowing faintly. They dwarfed the frigates and cruisers of earlier battles. These were not hunters. These were leviathans. The Imperial fleet froze, their officers staring in disbelief. One whispered, "Impossible, their fleet should be small, broken." But there they were, rows upon rows of Terran warships stretching like a wall of steel. Humanity's true strength. Revealed at last, the Terran flagship stood at the center. A colossal vessel unlike anything the Empire possessed. Its hull scarred from ancient wars, yet alive with energy. its cannons the size of towers, its silhouette sharp and cold. The human commander's face appeared once more across every Imperial screen, his words steady, his voice carrying across the entire armada. "You were warned," he said. "You thought us broken, you thought us forgotten, but we are the storm you cannot tame. Leave now or your fleet will die." Rage consumed the Imperial admirals. They laughed to hide their fear. "Fire everything." The order roared across the fleet. Hundreds of ships unleashed their fury. Plasma storms, missile barrages, beams that split moons. The void became a sea of light and fire. For minutes the Empire rained destruction upon the Terran fleet. The admirals shouted triumph. Soldiers cheered, believing the battle was won. But when the fire cleared, their cheers turned to horror. The Terran fleet was still there, untouched. Shields shimmered faintly before fading. Weapons remained hot. Formations remained perfect. The Empire's most powerful barrage had done nothing. And then the Terrans struck. Rail cannons screamed. Kinetic projectiles slicing through dreadnought armor like cloth. Massive carriers unleashed swarms of fighters that darted into Imperial formations, tearing ships apart with impossible speed. Terran warships moved as if they were one mind, each shot precise, each strike devastating. The Empire's largest ships fell first. Colossal dreadnoughts cut into pieces by coordinated fire. Supercarriers split in half. Their engines silenced. Siege cruisers detonated. Their weapons turned. Against them, the void burned with the wreckage of the Empire's pride. Admiral Carthos shouted for order. But the comms were chaos. Captains screaming, crews begging for help, formations collapsing, panic spreading faster than orders. The Terrans gave no mercy. They advanced without hesitation, crushing every resistance. At one point, an Imperial superweapon, a doomsday cannon capable of cracking planets, was charged. Its glow brighter than a sun, but before it could fire, a Terran strike team of frigates pierced its defenses, detonating its core. The explosion blinded the battlefield. Dozens of ships caught in the fire. The Terrans did not stop, their silence more terrifying than any roar. They destroyed with precision, not cruelty. Every ship they targeted fell, and every survivor knew the truth. The humans were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting to ensure the galaxy never chained them again. The battle lasted hours, though to the survivors it felt like days when it ended. Half the Imperial armada was gone, reduced to debris and silence. The rest drifted in terror, broken, their weapons useless, their pride shattered. Across the void, the Terran flagship loomed, the human commander's face appearing once more, his eyes steady, his words cold. "You still live only because we allow it. Go, tell your emperor what you have seen. Tell him the Terrans do not kneel. Tell him never to cross this border again." The survivors fled, their engines blazing, their voices filled with shame. They did not look back, for behind them the Terran fleet remained, silent, unshaken, eternal, and across the galaxy. The message spread like wildfire. The Empire had unleashed its greatest armada, and the humans had broken it. The forgotten race had risen again, and now every empire whispered in fear, "Do not enter Terran territory." The Empire had never known humiliation like this. Worlds that once trembled at the sight of their banners now whispered of weakness. Merchants mocked their pride in secret. Smaller powers began to question their tribute. The Emperor could not allow it. Pride was the spine of the Empire, and it was cracking. So the order came, an order that shook the galaxy. The last of the Imperial reserves were to be gathered. Every dreadnought, every siege carrier, every planet-killer weapon. Fleets from every province called to one place, the border of Terran space. The galaxy watched as the largest gathering of warships in history unfolded. More than 1,000 capital ships, weapons capable of burning stars themselves. The Emperor declared this would be the final stand, a war to erase the Terran name forever. He called it justice, he called it destiny. His generals repeated his words, but in the silent hearts of his soldiers, fear gnawed. The Terrans had shattered them twice already, and still, the humans had not revealed the full extent of their power. As the Imperial Armada entered a system known as Orion's Gate, a cluster of stars marking the boundary of Terran territory, the void seemed to grow colder. The light of the suns dimmed. The very air inside ships felt heavier. Crews whispered that even the stars feared Terrans. For hours the fleet advanced without resistance, tension building. Then the Terrans revealed themselves not with a single ship, not with a small fleet, but with a wall of steel and fire stretching across the void. Carriers larger than mountains, warships the size of cities. Their formation, locked in silence, each vessel scarred but alive, each cannon glowing with restrained fury. At the heart of the Terran fleet stood their greatest warship, a colossal supercarrier called Aegis Eternal. Its hull dark as midnight, its towers bristling with rail cannons that could pierce planets, its engines glowing faintly like the eyes of a predator. The sight of it froze even the boldest Imperial captains. The human commander's face appeared once more across every Imperial screen, his voice calm but iron. "This is your end. You were warned. But you would not listen. You call yourselves eternal. But today, eternity breaks." The battle began with a roar that shook the galaxy. The Empire unleashed everything. Doomsday cannons burned the void. Plasma storms tore through the stars. Missiles blackened the sky with fire. The Terrans answered in silence. Their rail cannons fired, kinetic fury ripping through dreadnought armor. Their stealth ships blinked in and out, striking engines and bridges with merciless precision. Their fighter swarms moved like blades in the dark, slicing Imperial lines apart. The clash at Orion's gate was unlike anything seen before. Whole moons cracked under stray fire. Stars dimmed as energy storms tore through them. The void was filled with fire and wreckage, thousands of ships burning at once. The screams of dying crews echoing across comm channels. But the Terrans fought differently, not with rage, not with pride, but with cold purpose. Every ship acted in harmony, every strike planned. They were not improvising. They were executing a strategy forged through centuries of survival. The Empire's dreadnoughts tried to hold, their massive cannons tearing into Terran lines for a brief moment. It seemed they might hold. Then the Aegis Eternal moved, its cannons firing a storm of projectiles that split 3 dreadnoughts in half with a single volley. Its fighters unleashed plasma charges that burrowed into enemy hulls before detonating, turning ships into fireballs. Admiral Karthos, aboard the Emperor's spear, shouted for his crews to rally, his voice cracked but strong. "We are the Empire, hold the line." His dreadnought turned its massive cannon toward the Terran flagship, charging for a killing shot. The cannon fired, a beam of energy brighter than a sun streaked through the void. It struck the Aegis Eternal and vanished. The Terran flagship bent the beam aside, its shields rippling like water. The energy dispersed into harmless light, and then it fired back, one shot, one rail strike, piercing the Emperor's spear from bow to stern. The dreadnought erupted into a silent explosion, fragments spinning into the dark. Admiral Karthos gone in a flash. The Empire's morale shattered, formations collapsed, ships fled in every direction. But the Terrans did not allow escape. Cloaked vessels blocked their routes, fighters hunted down stragglers, carriers unleashed storms of rail fire that turned fleeing ships into dust. One Imperial supercarrier tried to ram the Terran lines, its captain screaming into comms that he would take as many humans as he could. But before it reached, 3 Terran frigates weaved around it, placing charges on its hull. The carrier detonated, its death lighting the void like a dying sun. The battle raged for hours, though it felt eternal, and when the smoke cleared, the truth was undeniable. The Empire's greatest armada, its final stand, was broken. More than half its fleet reduced to wreckage, the survivors fleeing in disgrace, their voices choked with terror. Across the field, the Terrans did not celebrate. Their ships did not flash victory signals. Their commander did not gloat. They simply withdrew into silence, their formation tightening once more, their presence unshaken. The galaxy held its breath. Every empire, every colony, every wandering trader, all knew now what the truth was. The humans were no myth. They were no primitive survivors. They were a force, a storm, a predator that had waited in shadows. And at Orion's gate they had proven it. The Empire had fought its final stand, and humanity had broken it. The warning had never been a bluff. It was a promise. Do not enter Terran territory. The silence after Orion's gate was heavier than the battle itself. Wreckage drifted through the void for weeks. the twisted remains of Imperial dreadnoughts spinning slowly in the cold dark. The largest fleet ever assembled had been broken, and its defeat echoed across the galaxy. The survivors fled home in disgrace, their engines burning at full speed, their voices trembling on comm channels. Stories spread with every jump through hyperspace. Some swore they had seen Terran ships bend light itself. Others whispered that the humans fought with machines older than the stars. But one truth united. Them all, the Empire, had been crushed. When the shattered armada limped into the Imperial capital, there was no cheering, no parades, no music. Citizens lined the streets in silence as the broken ships landed. Officers once proud walked with bowed heads. The Emperor raged in his throne room, his fury shaking the palace, yet even he could not silence the fear spreading like fire. For the galaxy had seen, the galaxy had heard. Messages flew across star systems. Merchants whispered warnings in cantinas. Smugglers traded stories for credits. Minor empires sent scouts to the border of Terran space but never returned. The old warning was no longer a rumor. It was a law written in fire. Do not enter Terran territory. On distant worlds. Children asked about the humans and parents could not answer. Some said they were monsters. Some said they were guardians, but all agreed on one thing. The Terrans were not to be provoked. Within the ruins of the Imperial fleet, Admiral Karthos's name was whispered with respect. His death at Orion's gate becoming legend. A symbol of arrogance turned to ash. Younger officers feared his ghost more than they had feared the humans. For his final words had been true. They knew us before we knew them. Back within Terran command, there was no celebration. The war room was quiet. Men and women stood over holographic tables, studying the wreckage, recording the data. Their commanders, face calm but heavy. They will come again, he said, his voice low. They always do. Around him the officers nodded, not in fear but in readiness. The humans knew this victory was not the end. It was only the beginning, because the galaxy was vast and pride was endless. Empires would not stop. They would test the Terrans, again and again and again. So humanity remained silent, their fleets patrolling the shadows, their weapons sharpened, their warning still broadcast across the stars. Do not enter Terran territory. They did not seek allies. They did not seek tribute. They wanted only one thing: to be left alone. Yet across the galaxy, silence turned to awe. Smaller empires whispered that perhaps the Terrans could be protectors. Others argued they were. Executioners, merchants claimed they had seen Terran ships following them for days without a word, only to vanish into the void when no threat appeared. The humans were becoming myth once more, but this time a living myth. In the halls of the Emperor, fear turned to calculation. He ordered spies. He ordered scientists, desperate to learn how humans fought, how they cloaked, how they bent beams aside, but no answer came. Every attempt ended in silence. The humans allowed no secrets to escape. The Emperor stood before his people, his golden eyes burning with anger. He declared the war not over. He called the defeat a trick, a shadow war. He promised vengeance, but his people no longer believed. They whispered behind closed doors. If the Terrans can destroy 1,000 ships, what hope do we have? Fear had replaced faith. Meanwhile, the humans remembered. In the deep chambers of their command centers, their archives filled with old battles. They remembered the chains, the whips, the burning of their worlds. They remembered every empire that had tried to enslave them, and they remembered how they had broken each one. This was their strength, not numbers, not technology, but memory. Humanity did not fight for conquest. Humanity fought to ensure those memories never returned. On the edge of Terran space, a lone Imperial survivor floated in an escape pod, rescued by a Terran patrol. He trembled as the humans pulled him aboard, expecting torture, expecting death. But instead they gave him water, gave him warmth. He asked why, voice shaking. And the Terran officer answered simply, "Because we are not like you. But cross our border again, and we will end you." The survivor wept, not from kindness, but from terror. Weeks later, that same survivor carried the message back to the Emperor. He fell to his knees before the throne and spoke the truth with trembling lips. They do not want our worlds. They do not want our tribute. They want only silence. But if we cross them, again they will erase us, and so the legend grew, whispered in shadows, carried on every wind, carved into the minds of every race. The humans had risen from chains, turned their pain into fire, and now stood as the guardians of their own dark corner of space, unbending, unbroken, waiting. The galaxy understood at last the warning had never been weakness, it was a promise. Do not enter Terran territory, for those who do will never return.